Hi, this is Man of Codpics. Um, there was a time when I wanted to upgrade my camera, so obviously I need a reason for that, and I was using Canon 5D2. It was a popular camera. Then there's this Sony, and Sony mirrorless, starting from A7R2. I bought that, and remember it was like 40 something megapixel. So I need the reason to do the upgrade actually at that time. So I read up a lot about why we need more megapixels, and there were a lot of standard. It's like an FAQ. Everyone has been talking about it, and most of the articles are basically saying we don't need that much resolution because our eyes can tell the difference. And all these technical reasoning saying about the distance, printing resolution, the 300 dpi. Simply put, it's just you can't tell difference. So then I came across this article, scantips.com. The author, I think, is Ray Fulton. I don't know him, obviously, but I spent some time reading, and I was pretty enlightened. And I have to say thank you to him also, because I learned quite a bit on his site about other things like lighting, standard questions that we ask about photography. But the way that he wrote about it is fundamentally correct, and saved me a lot of time to digest from a whole lot of other information. And this particular topic, the basic taking from his saying is we would never have enough resolution. It's not saying that the observation that we can't tell the difference from our human eyes. That's correct. But there is a point that we might overlook. Is not just that we look at the output of a digital image in terms of just the pixels as a matrix. That's the resulting product. But for a sensor, for our digital capture, when we capture those images, when we have a reality, we want to capture it, our reality is analog. That's the reason why when we were still using film, which is an analog process, film has a much better resolution in that sense when we scan it line by line. In terms of optical resolution, it has a lot more capacity to store information than what we're having now. Of course, we are not using film, and we turn digital. The fact that we turn digital using 01 to represent analog information, that goes to the famous sampling. We need to mimic analog by taking samples from what we measure in a discrete fashion. So I assume that you understand what is sampling. And of course, you could read it from Scientific site or any other site about how we sample analog information into digital. That's the basic thing that we like music, MP3, everything digital today are out of sampling. So the fundamental here is the fact that we sample our analog world, that we need the CMOS sensor to have enough resolution, enough meaning increasing amount of resolution to approximate reality. So in short, is the more resolution we have, the closer our sampling or the resulting image would be to reality. But in that sense, we might never approach the real reality because it's not the real reality, right? It's a digital sample approximation of the analog world. So that's the essence of digital imaging, be it a scanner, which is on reflective light, or a CMOS sensor, which is on direct light. It's the same thing. The minute that we want to approximate our world with digital techniques, that we incur like a curve of approximations, like a increasing approach to getting closer to representing that reality. And it might appear to be like a log curve, where initially it would be deeper, more difficult to achieve. Then finally we get easier, but then it's still like you need certain increase in resolution to achieve a little better approximation to reality. So starting from, say, remember old times when we start digital, we have like a few megapixel. To now we have like on our standard full frame CMOS size might be 60 megapixel, or on say the bigger one, the medium format GFX, they have bigger size CMOS, medium format CMOS, and 100 megabit pixel per on that format. So the question now becomes not on the output, not on how our limitation of our eyes, not on our distance to the image, not on whether or not we could tell the difference. The question now is on how much resolution we need for the system, the camera system, to approximate reality, approximate that physical reality that we are taking we are photographing it. And the resulting product is be it in a resolution which is 50 or what, it is still like the high resolution that you capture, the better result of that image is. So yes, your eyes are limited in observing the fine details or can't tell the difference, that sort of thing. But then you want a better image, closer to reality, to be presented to you in order to tell the difference. So our focus on why resolution is necessary is then different. We need that resolution, the system as a whole, to have better sampling of the reality. That's the idea. Now, with that idea, then you look at what this article is about. You could, the author, Wayne, also talk about Nyquist's theorem about 2x sampling, and these are the basic. But he also mentioned that's the minimum, and the more the better. So oversampling becomes a necessity, and so on and so forth. So now I was intrigued by his comparison. If you look at this, and he's trying to progressively show you the approximation possible when you increase your DPI or your resolution. So as you can see, if you increase your resolution, you could tell from that pattern, like you look at the pattern here, from here to there, it's not only that the granularity increases, it's also the pattern as a whole being different. In other words, there are always blanks. Like if you think about it, if you take samples over an analog curve, there are always chunks of those analog measurements that are not being sampled. So the system has to fill in the blanks. And the way they fill in the blanks are those edgy things. So these edgy things are not reality. They are being filled in the blank because of the systems like that is discrete. And it can never be analog. So these blanks are being filled in. It could be misinformation. It could be termed as noise. Or it could be interpolation, if you use that word. So there are, nowadays there are, if you notice on microphone, on the mobile phone area, where they have very small sensors, but some of the mobile phones claim to have 60 megapixel, 60 megapixel, or even higher, all because of this computational algorithm to fill in the blanks. So the system are filling the blanks for you, but they are not reality. They are artificially introduced to approximate reality, and it could be good, it could be bad, depending on how you implement it and how the audience, the observer like us, look at it. Now, I remember when I was reading this, and then I think, how would that be how different would that interpolation be with different sensors? So at that time I haven't bought the A7R2 yet. But then I could download a raw file, a sample raw file from that series of camera, from that model, on I forgot which website. Then I use those raw file to compare with my 5D2 raw file. The way I compare is real simple. I use a raw file editor and maximize the pixels. So I more or less could up to seeing these kind of pixel pattern. And I noticed there are, when you maximize it in that level, we're not talking about pixel peaking, we're talking about how that sensor, how the system as a whole, the hardware, the camera system, how it interpolate and sample those reality protons. And I figured that they are very different. The higher resolution camera, the way that they represent those curves and complex areas, like those with high contrast, with a lot more details, are very different from a lower pixel CMOS sensor. I think that is very much related to obviously the less resolution you have, the less information you sample, so you have to fill in more blanks. So in that sense, the more resolution you have, the more proton samples that you could measure or sample, you still have a lot of gaps to fill, but then you are approaching better reality relative to a lower resolution sensor. Plus, Wayne's also implicitly made a point. It's about the distribution of information on an image. If you look at a fairly square and fair, fairly distributed, no edges, just maybe plain dots, simple plain photograph, it has, because of the fact that it has fairly even distribution of information, the sampling could be easier. But for more complicated pictures with a lot of different details, area spots on different areas, different spots of those image will need much higher sampling to represent the details. But the fact that you can only apply a monotonous or universal generic single sampling over an entire image, meaning that you have to oversample it much more than is necessary. that's the reason sometimes when we take a look at very complicated scene, like if we picture a very high dynamic range scene or with a lot of different color contrast, you will find that it's harder for your camera to call it out. It's easier to see one camera system is better than the other, and all because of, I would say, of the ability to sample it better on one system than the other, either by the amount of resolution that it could represent or by the algorithm itself to fill in the blanks. So yeah, so to summarize my point, or what I learned from Wayne's on this article, is basically, first of all, our eyes might be limited on our resolution differentiation, but we need to have better image. And if we want to see a better image, we need high resolution. Why? Because we are in a digital world, and we need to sample the analog information, and we need to oversample it. And oversampling is not a 0-1 process. It's not like, oh, for that distance of observation, we only need to have X amount of megapixel. That's not true, because it's an approximation of reality, and it's a continuous process, meaning that it is approximating it infinitely. So in the sense, you might have a depreciation of value when you keep on increasing your megapixel count, but you still need to increase it. That's one. The second is about the distribution of information on your image. So more complicated information-rich image needs to have better oversampling, which is translates into more resolution, and that's to a certain extent explains why medium, the larger sensor you have, the more ability for you to sample things, and less noise, high resolution. These are all come down into sampling. And finally, if you want to take a look at the way that different sensor system fill in the blanks, you could compare your raw files with other raw files, either of a lesser resolution or same resolution or even higher. Now, the fact that there are, of course, there are complications, at least the common sense that tells me is the more electronically speaking, the more pixel you want to fill into a fixed area, the more chance that you have noise, and that's a limitation, a electronic engineering limitation, and maybe we are when we get to better CMOS or semiconductor technology, when we get to those nanometer manufacturing process, in a smaller nanometer process, when the market can absorb those costs better, we will be seeing more resolutions in stack sensor like nowadays what we have. We might not be having one layer of sensors. We might be having multiple layers of sensors. We are already doing stacking sensors, and we're going 3D on increasing our resolution. As far as I understand, stacking sensor right now is not just for resolutions, for reading out speed and things like those, and obviously they are advancing. And there is, if we go back to the FAQ, like if we should upgrade, for me, if budget allows, definitely you don't want to not to take advantage of the technology. I mean, even just for the sake of capturing the image and storing it for future use, there's no reason not to capture and store in the best resolution possible. If it's not because the large format film camera is so bulky and expensive nowadays, also on the film, everybody would go with the bigger camera, isn't it? Because if it's as lightweight as a 135, there's no point not to do it. But just not that convenient, isn't it? So we have digital, and if you have a budget for the highest resolution possible and is feature rich, then there's no reason not to use it. So when people talk about I don't need to upgrade, I don't need to take advantage of the resolution because I can't tell the difference, I think that he or she might miss the point of being able to capture a better image is the first step to being able to see it. So yes, you might be limited into seeing an image by telling the difference of whether it has a higher DPI on printing or on screen. But the image itself, before it's being seen like by you, it needs to be captured. And that's the idea of this article, that is telling you that you need those high resolution, increasing resolution to get you a better picture. That's the better picture in terms of being able to capture the reality better. That's, again, don't get me wrong, is there are all sorts of other factors to have a better picture, whether light condition, your skills, your storytelling, whatever. Those are, we all understand those. Which is assuming those are constant, then still a better resolution, high resolution sensor is always better. That's the way I understand it. Do correct me if I'm wrong, or share with me what your feeling is. And I do hope you find this website useful, and I do appreciate the author spending so much time to not only on this article, but on many others, fundamental articles on photography and scanning and digital imaging on his website. And thank you for him for his enlightening. Thank you. Hope you enjoy it today, and might spend some time on his site. Cheers. Bye.